Daddy, why are there strangers in our house? My 8-year-old daughter asked me that through FaceTime while I stood in my own driveway, staring at my front door with keys that no longer work. I'd just returned from 18 months in Afghanistan as a Navy SEAL, and my HOA president had stolen my house, renting it out for $3,200, 0 cents a month while I was serving overseas. $57,600. That's what Margaret Thornfield pocketed. She changed my locks, moved strangers into my father's bedroom, and turned my daughter's princess room into someone else's nursery. But here's the thing about messing with a Navy SEAL's family. We don't just get mad, we get tactical. What would you do if you came home from war to find strangers in your house? Drop a comment below, because what happened next involved the FBI, my old SEAL team, and the most epic takedown of a corrupt HOA dictator you've ever witnessed. Let me back up and give you the full picture. I'm Jake Martinez, Petty Officer First Class, Navy SEALs Team 5. For 18 months, I was running special operations in Afghanistan, the kind of missions that don't make the evening news. My wife died in a car accident 3 years ago, so my daughter Emma has been staying with my sister in Denver while I was deployed. The house in question, a 4-bedroom ranch in Pinewood Estates that my father built in 1987. He was one of the original founders of this little slice of suburban paradise. When he passed 2 years ago, he left me the house, his workshop full of tools, and a Bronze Star from Vietnam sitting in a display case. This wasn't just any house. This was my daughter's home, filled with memories of her mother, her grandfather's stories, and princess decorations that took us 3 weekends to put up perfectly. Before deploying, I did everything by the book. Sent certified letters to the HOA notifying them of my deployment, set up automatic payments for my mortgage and the $200 0 cents monthly HOA fees, even arranged for my buddy Tom to handle lawn maintenance. The house was supposed to stay empty and secure, standard procedure for deployed military. Now, let me introduce you to the villain of our story, Margaret Maggie Thornfield, age 52, HOA president and professional pain in everyone's ass. Picture the most entitled Karen you've ever encountered. Multiply that by 10 and give her a clipboard and a Napoleon complex. She's married to City Councilman Robert Thornfield, which makes her think she's untouchable. Maggie's got this thing about military families. She thinks we're transient and bring down property values. I'd heard the whispers from neighbors, how she'd pushed out 2 other military families over the years with petty violations and endless harassment. The fluorescent lights in the HOA office buzz like angry wasps, and the place always smells like burnt coffee and broken dreams. So there I was, 5 a.m. on a Tuesday, standing in my own driveway like an idiot. The Prius in my parking spot had a coexist bumper sticker, which felt ironic considering someone had just stolen my existence. I knocked on the door, my door, and this young couple answered, Derek and Lisa Patterson. Nice people with 2 kids and absolutely no idea they'd been living in stolen property. Excuse me, I said, showing them my military ID. I think there's been a mistake. This is my house. The confusion on their faces was genuine. They showed me a legitimate rental agreement, security deposit receipts, everything. They'd been paying $3,200, 0 cents a month to something called Pinewood Property Solutions, LLC, for 14 months. They even had a key that worked, unlike mine. That's when I noticed my father's Bronze Star display case was empty. Family photos, gone. Emma's bedroom had been converted into a nursery, complete with a crib where her Princess Castle bed used to be. I explained the situation as calmly as possible. SEAL training teaches you to stay cool under pressure, but seeing strangers' baby bottles in my kitchen cabinets was testing those limits. I asked for 24 hours to sort things out legally and slept in my truck that night, watching my own house like I was on surveillance duty in Kandahar. The next morning, I marched into that HOA office at 8 a.m. sharp, wearing my full dress uniform. Every ribbon, every medal, polished to perfection. If I was going to war with these people, I wanted them to know exactly who they were dealing with. Maggie sat behind her oversized desk like some discount dictator, not even bothering to look up from her computer when I walked in. The motivational posters on her walls were the kind of corporate garbage that makes you want to punch something. Teamwork spelled out with mountain climbers, excellence with a soaring eagle, real inspiring stuff. "Ma'am, I'm Petty Officer Martinez," I said, standing at attention. "I believe there's been a mistake with my property at 1247 Oakwood Drive." She glanced up with the enthusiasm of someone being asked to clean a public restroom. "And you are?" "The owner. I've been deployed for 18 months. I came home to find strangers living in my house." That's when she got this little smirk, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Oh, that property. Yes, we had to take action. You were in violation of our community standards." She slid a manila folder across the desk like she was dealing poker cards. Inside were photos of my lawn looking slightly overgrown, pictures taken 3 months into my deployment. There were violation notices dated throughout my absence, none of which I'd ever received because they weren't sent to my military address. "Ma'am, I have certified mail receipts proving I notified you of my deployment. I arranged for lawn maintenance. I paid every HOA fee on time." "That's not how I remember it," she said, examining her nails like they were more interesting than a veteran's housing crisis. "Besides, you should have gotten permission before leaving." "Permission? To serve my country?" "This is a private community, Mr. Martinez. We have standards." The gaslighting was impressive, I'll give her that. She had this whole story ready, how my property was abandoned, how they'd sent multiple notices, how the rental was just emergency property preservation. It was like listening to a politician explain why their tax hike was actually good for you. Then came the kicker. She opened another folder and slid a document across the desk. "You owe $14,000, 0 cents in back violations, maintenance fees, and administrative costs. Plus, the renters have a legal lease. You'll need to honor that or face legal action, or $14,000 for a slightly overgrown lawn while I was getting shot at in Afghanistan. Frankly, Mr. Martinez," she continued, "maybe military housing would be more suitable for your lifestyle. We'd be happy to help you list the property for sale." The dismissal was clear. She thought she'd won. But here's what Maggie didn't know about Navy SEALs. We don't break under pressure. We document everything. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of every document, every violation notice, every piece of her carefully constructed lie. "Ma'am, I'll be in touch." "You do that," she said, already turning back to her computer. Mini twist time, I walked out of there and drove straight to attorney Jim Hoffman's office. Hoffman's a Vietnam vet who I thought would understand the situation. He listened to my story, reviewed the paperwork, and gave me the worst news possible. "Son, they may have covered their legal bases. HOA law is tricky, and they've got this emergency property management clause. This could take months in court, cost you $10,000, 0 cents up front, and there's no guarantee you'll win." His advice? Find another place to live. Fighting HOAs is like fighting the IRS. You can win, but it'll cost you everything. That night, I sat in my truck in my own driveway, staring at my house through the windshield. I could see the Patterson family inside, the kids playing in what used to be Emma's room, Derek helping with homework at my kitchen table. They weren't the enemy, they were victims too. I called Emma, and her voice nearly broke me. "When are you coming to get me, Daddy?" "Soon, Princess. Daddy has to fix some things first." "Is our house okay?" "It will be, sweetheart, I promise." After I hung up, I did what any good SEAL does when facing impossible odds. I called for backup. I texted my old platoon sergeant, Tom Rodriguez. "Need to talk. Got a situation. Can you come out?" His response came back in 30 seconds. "Already booking flight. Semper Fi." Because here's the thing about military brotherhood. We don't leave anyone behind. Ever. While waiting for Tom to arrive, I decided to do some reconnaissance. If you're going to fight bureaucrats, you need to understand their weapons. So I spent the next day at the library diving deep into HOA law and military protections. That's where I discovered my first piece of ammunition, the Service Remembers Civil Relief Act, or SCRA. This federal law protects deployed military from legal actions without court approval. Maggie had violated federal law by taking action against my property during deployment. Knowledge nugget 1. If you're military and facing legal issues during deployment, file an SCRA violation complaint with your state's attorney general. It's federal law that they can't touch your property without court permission. But the real gold mine was in the county property records. I found the original 1987 HOA charter that my father had signed as a founding member, right there in black and white. Military families exempt from vacancy violations during active duty service. Guess what? That clause had mysteriously disappeared in a 2019 charter revision. Someone had deliberately removed military protections from the HOA rules. Armed with this information, I decided to test the neighborhood waters. I started knocking on doors, talking to people I'd known for years. The reception was mixed. Mrs. Chen, the elderly widow next door, whispered through her screen door like we were in some spy movie. "Jake, I'm so sorry. We tried to speak up at the board meeting, but Maggie said you'd abandoned the property. She showed us photos of the overgrown lawn." "Mrs. Chen, I was serving in Afghanistan." "I know, dear, but she said you weren't coming back, that the house was becoming an eyesore." She glanced around nervously. "Jake, I can't help you publicly. My property taxes get reviewed by the city, and Robert Thornfield has connections. I'm sorry." The fear in her eyes told me everything. This wasn't just about my house. Maggie had terrorized the entire neighborhood into submission. Bob Williams, a retired factory worker 3 houses down, was more direct. "Jake, this is bullshit, and we all know it. But half the neighborhood is scared of Maggie, and the other half moved here because they like her iron fist." When even my neighbors were afraid to speak up, I knew I was dealing with something bigger than HOA overreach. This was systematic intimidation. That's when I decided to try a different approach. Media attention. I contacted Sarah Martinez at the local newspaper, a young reporter hungry for a real story. She listened with genuine outrage. "This is incredible. A Navy SEAL comes home to find his house stolen by the HOA? This is front-page material." For about 12 hours, I thought I'd found an ally. Then Sarah called back with defeat in her voice. "My editor killed the story. Apparently the Thornfields are major advertisers. Plus, legal says HOA disputes are civil matters, not news." But she gave me a suggestion that would change everything. "Jake, have you considered social media? Facebook groups, veteran forums? Sometimes public pressure works better than traditional media." That night, sitting in my truck with McDonald's Wi-Fi, I crafted a Facebook post with military precision. Photos of my house, my medals, the fraudulent rental agreement, and a detailed timeline. I posted it to every veteran group I could find. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 47 shares in the first hour, 200 comments of outrage and support. Other veterans started sharing their own HOA horror stories. A popular veteran YouTuber with 400,000 subscribers shared my post with the caption, "This is why I left suburbia. HOAs are mini dictatorships that hate freedom." But here's where it gets interesting, the mini twist. Maggie's counterattack came swift and vicious. By the next morning, I woke up to find my truck's windshield cracked and Loser keyed into the driver's side door. No security cameras in the area, of course. Then came the intimidation. Cars started driving slowly past my truck throughout the day. Different cars, different drivers, but always slowing down to stare. When I approached them, they'd speed away. The final straw was the certified letter I found on my windshield that evening. Cease and desist from harassment, stalking, and defamation of HOA board members. Further violations will result in criminal charges and civil action. That's when I realized something important. Maggie wasn't just corrupt. She was scared. People don't escalate to intimidation and legal threats unless they know they're in the wrong. So I made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone and started a group text to my old SEAL team. "Brothers, I need help. Not the kind that breaks laws, but the kind that enforces them. Who's available for a righteous mission?" 5 immediate responses. On my way. The cavalry was coming, and Maggie Thornfield had no idea what she'd just unleashed. Friday morning, I heard the rumble of a diesel engine that made my heart sing. Tom Gunny Rodriguez pulled up in a lifted F-250 with Marine Corps decals covering half the tailgate. The man looked exactly the same as he did in Afghanistan, still built like a brick wall, still wearing his mess with the bull, get the horns expression. "Old dog, you look like hell," he said, climbing out with a duffel bag and a cooler. "Good to see you too, Gunny." See, where's this HOA bitch who thinks she can mess with my boys? Easy, I warned. We do this clean, legal, and by the book. Copy that, but we do it loud. By noon, the rest of my old team started rolling in like some kind of military reunion. Danny Doc Kowalski drove his RV from Colorado. Alex Hammer Thompson flew in from Florida with enough camping gear to supply a small army. Mike Preacher Johnson arrived from Arizona in a pickup truck that had seen more combat zones than most generals. We set up what can only be described as a tactical operations center in my driveway. Folding tables, camping chairs, American flags, and enough military precision to make a general weep with pride. The sound of boots on gravel and the snap of tent poles being assembled had a therapeutic effect I hadn't felt since coming home. The whole neighborhood started paying attention. Kids on bikes stopped to stare at the military gear. Parents came out to water plants they'd already watered twice. Even the mailman slowed down to get a better look. "All right, Bulldog," Gunny said, spreading my documentation across the folding table like we were planning a raid. "Brief us on the situation." I laid out everything: the fraudulent rental, the SCRA violations, the shell company, the intimidation tactics. These men had been through hell with me, and they listened with the same intensity they'd shown during mission briefings in Afghanistan. Doc, who'd been dealing with VA bureaucracy for years, zeroed in on the legal angles. This isn't just property theft. This is organized fraud with a federal civil rights component. Hammer, who worked in security, studied the HOA bylaws. They removed the military exemption clause in 2019. That wasn't an accident. That was targeting. But it was Preacher who nailed the real issue. "Jake, this isn't about your house anymore. This is about stopping a predator who's been using bureaucratic warfare against military families." That afternoon, we made our presence known. 5 veterans in full-dress uniform marched into the HOA office like we owned the place, which technically we did, since we all pay dues to various HOA. The look on Maggie's face when we walked in was priceless. Pure panic mixed with the kind of rage you see in people who've never been challenged in their little kingdom. "Mrs. Thornfield," I said with military courtesy, "I'd like to introduce my colleagues. We're here to formally request the return of my property and discuss the legal violations we've identified." Hammer slid a manila folder across her desk. Inside were copies of federal SCRA violations, state property fraud statutes, and county zoning violations, all documented with dates, evidence, and legal citations. "I'm not discussing anything without the HOA's lawyer present," she stammered. "You're trespassing on private property." "Ma'am," Preacher said in his calm chaplain voice, "this is a community center, funded by HOA fees. As property owners, we have every right to be here during business hours." The psychological pressure was beautiful to watch. 5 military veterans, calm and professional, taking notes while she became increasingly agitated. We didn't threaten. We didn't raise our voices. We just existed in her space, with quiet confidence. "If you don't leave immediately, I'm calling the police," she finally snapped. "That's your right, ma'am," Gunny replied. "We'll wait for them outside." Mini twist time. The police officer who responded was Deputy Mike Harrison, an Army veteran who recognized me from veteran meetups. When Maggie tried to paint us as dangerous, Mike took one look at our orderly camp and professional demeanor, then asked to review our documentation. "Jesus, Jake," he said after reading through the evidence. "This is federal crime territory. Why haven't you filed with the FBI?" "Working on it," I replied. "Right now, we're trying to resolve this locally." Mike approached Maggie. "Mrs. Thornfield, these gentlemen have every right to be here. If you have concerns about criminal activity, file a report. Otherwise, stop wasting my time." As he left, Mike quietly told me, "My brother's a JAG officer at Pendleton. Want me to make a call?" That evening, the neighborhood dynamics started shifting. Mrs. Chen approached our camp with homemade cookies and the courage she'd been missing. "Thank you for your service, all of you. What they did to Jake is wrong." Bob Williams joined us for dinner. My dad was Navy in Korea. "He'd be ashamed of how this neighborhood has been treating you, Jake." The sound of laughter around a camping stove, veterans sharing stories under the stars, seemed to remind people what community was supposed to feel like. For the first time since coming home, I didn't feel alone. "Tomorrow," Gunny announced as we settled in for the night, "we go on the offensive." Saturday morning, Doc led us to the county courthouse for what he called Bureaucratic Warfare 101. If there's one thing military veterans understand, it's how to navigate complex systems and find the information others miss. The key, Doc explained as we spread files across a table in the records room, is understanding that bureaucrats always leave paper trails. They can't help themselves. That's when we found it. The smoking gun buried in a folder marked Emergency Property Management Authorizations, a document dated 6 months into my deployment showing a property management agreement between the HOA and Pinewood Property Solutions, LLC. Hammer, who had experience with fraud investigation, ran the LLC registration on his phone. Pinewood Property Solutions, LLC was registered 3 months after Jake deployed. Sole owner, Margaret Thornfield. The criminal conspiracy became crystal clear. Maggie created a shell company to legally rent my property. She forged documents claiming property abandonment. She pocketed $57,600.00 in rental income over 18 months. She used HOA authority to legitimize her theft. Knowledge nugget 2. Always check LLC registrations through your state's Secretary of State website when investigating property scams. Shell companies are legal, but using them to commit fraud. But the real breakthrough came when we drove to the local JAG office. Major Lisa Park, Deputy Harrison's brother, reviewed our evidence with growing alarm. "This is a textbook Service Remembers Civil Relief Act violation," she said. The HOA had no legal authority to take action against your property during deployment without federal court approval. Then she dropped the bombshell. "I'm referring this to the FBI's white-collar crime unit. This crosses state lines. Rental income, federal military protections, organized fraud scheme." She pulled out the original 1987 HOA charter. This military exemption clause was in the original charter your father signed. Removing it without proper notice to affected parties may have been illegal, too. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about civil disputes anymore. This was about criminal prosecution. File complaints with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, your state's Attorney General, and the FBI, Major Park advised. Do it simultaneously. Don't give them time to destroy evidence. Back at our command center, we spent the afternoon creating a comprehensive evidence package. Timeline of events, financial records showing the shell company, SCRA violation documentation, witness statements from neighbors, and video evidence of harassment. For the first time since coming home, I felt the moral clarity that had sustained me through combat. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. Maggie hadn't just stolen my house. She'd stolen from a man serving his country. And she'd done it to other military families too. "Brothers," I told my team as we finished organizing the evidence, "tomorrow, we don't just file complaints. We go public. We make this so visible, so documented, so righteous that she has no choice but to fold." The mission was clear, the evidence was overwhelming, and we had the moral high ground. Maggie Thornfield was about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong Navy SEALs family. Sunday morning at 600, our team had grown. Word travels fast in the veteran community, and by sunrise, we had 8 military brothers ready for what Gunny called the most righteous mission of our civilian lives. Rosa Martinez, my cousin and a retired Navy legal specialist, had driven through the night from San Diego. Tank Williams, a Marine who'd become a social media expert, arrived with laptops and enough communication equipment to run a small war. Captain David Eagle Chen, Air Force retired, brought the organizational skills that had once coordinated airstrikes. We turned my driveway into a legitimate war room. Using a whiteboard borrowed from the community center, we created a mission board that would make any military planner proud. Executive: restore Jake's property and prosecute criminal fraud enemy forces, corrupt HOA leadership and complicit officials. Friendly forces: military veterans, sympathetic neighbors, legal system terrain, suburban HOA community, legal system, media landscape. "Gentleman and lady," Eagle announced, pointing to our 3-phase assault plan, "this is how we take down a tyrant." Phase 1, legal bombardment, 0800-1000 hours. Rosa led our legal assault with military precision. While the rest of us maintained our visible presence, she fired off complaints to every relevant agency. SCRA complaint with the Attorney General. FBI white-collar crime referral, consumer protection complaint, military discrimination complaint with emergency injunction request to halt all HOA actions. Knowledge nugget. 3. File complaints with multiple agencies simultaneously. Bureaucrats ignore single complaints, but pay attention when multiple agencies start asking questions. Phase 2, Media Warfare, 10000100 hours. Tank orchestrated our media campaign like he was calling in air support. Professional press releases with photos and documentation went to every outlet within 200 miles. He contacted veteran YouTubers, military magazines, and local news stations, framing this not as a civil dispute but as a criminal fraud targeting military families. The key, Tank explained while typing furiously, is controlling the narrative by providing overwhelming documentation. Make it impossible for them to spin this as a two-sided dispute. Phase 3, Community Engagement, 400 hours. Eagle organized our neighborhood outreach with the precision of a diplomatic mission. Door-to-door visits to explain the criminal fraud aspect, invitations to an evening information session, and coordination with sympathetic residents to attend Tuesday's emergency HOA. The beauty of our plan was its visibility. We established multiple camps throughout the neighborhood, with permission from sympathetic residents, creating a network of information stations. American flags flew at each location, folding tables displayed organized documentation, and we maintained the most professional, helpful demeanor with every resident. The psychological impact on Maggie was immediate. She drove by each location multiple times, making increasingly frantic phone calls. Her calls to police resulted in no violation found responses that only strengthened our position. Sunday evening, we held our information session in Bob Williams' backyard. 23 residents attended, nearly half the neighborhood. Using a borrowed projector, I presented our timeline with supporting documentation, the deployment orders and proper notifications, the shell company registration timeline, the $57,600.00 in stolen rental income, the forged documents and illegal lease agreements. The audience reaction was everything we'd hoped for. Audible gasps when the financial fraud was revealed, angry murmurs about the shell company scheme, supportive applause when I talked about military service. But the real breakthrough came when Mrs. Patterson, the renter, stood up. I had no idea. I'd been paying rent to Pinewood Property Solutions, not knowing it was Mrs. Thornfield's company. We're victims too. The community shift was palpable. Residents began openly discussing HOA corruption. Several volunteered to attend Tuesday's emergency board meeting. 3 requested information about running for HOA board positions. As the meeting ended, Eagle gathered our team. Gentlemen, we've achieved tactical surprise. The enemy is reacting instead of acting. Tomorrow, we press the advantage. The coordination for the final phase was flawless. Monday, media interviews and legal follow-ups. Tuesday, overwhelming presence at HOA emergency meeting. Wednesday, federal agents interview witnesses. Thursday, public vindication and property return. In Afghanistan, we fought for freedom, I told my brothers as we conducted our final equipment check. Here, we're fighting for justice. Same mission, different battlefield. Every veteran knew their role: cameras, recording devices, legal documents, backup power sources, emergency contact lists. We were ready for war. Monday morning brought a media storm that exceeded our wildest expectations. Tank's social media offensive had gone nuclear overnight. My story hit 2.3 million views on TikTok, 15,000 Facebook shares, and a Reddit thread with 50,000 upvotes. A veteran YouTuber created a 20-minute deep dive video that was trending nationwide. The local news coverage was unprecedented. Channel 7 ran an 8-minute morning show segment. The newspaper, whose editor had previously killed the story, suddenly ran a front-page feature after public pressure. Military Times picked up the story, and by noon, Fox News was requesting an interview. My quote had become a viral meme. I didn't fight for freedom overseas to come home and find it stolen by a fake HOA cop. But Maggie wasn't going down without a fight. Her counterattack was swift and vicious, a masterclass in desperation politics. By 8 a.m., she'd assembled her own war council, her husband Robert, their $400 0 cents an hour lawyer David Brennan, and what appeared to be a crisis management consultant. Their strategy was straight out of the political hit job playbook. Claim I was unstable and threatening. Position the rental as property preservation. Suggest I was leading a military occupation of the neighborhood. Threaten legal action against news outlets covering the story. The smear campaign included anonymous Facebook posts claiming I had PTSD, whisper campaigns about dangerous veterans, and suggestions that military training made me unpredictable. They even tried to get a restraining order against my entire team. Any twist time, their restraining order hearing backfired spectacularly. Judge Patricia Hendricks, a former Army Reserve JAG, reviewed Maggie's emergency request and wasn't buying it. Mrs. Thornfield, the judge said after hearing both sides, I see no evidence of threats or illegal activity. These veterans have the right to peaceful assembly and free speech. Request denied. But Judge Hendricks' private comment to Rosa was the real victory. This looks like retaliation against a service member. I'd suggest filing a civil rights complaint. The community response was overwhelming. 15 more residents visited our information stations throughout Monday. A petition circulated to remove Maggie from the HOA board. 3 residents filed their own complaints against the HOA board. Someone even shared security camera footage showing the vandalism of my truck. The unexpected game changer came when Jennifer Walsh, the HOA secretary, approached our camp that afternoon. She looked terrified but determined. I have documents you need to see, she whispered. I've been keeping records because I knew this was wrong. Jennifer provided the inside intelligence we needed, board meeting minutes showing premeditated planning, email communications about targeting my property, financial records showing shell company payments, evidence of other illegal rentals by board members. I'm a single mom, she explained. I was afraid of losing my job, but watching you fight back gave me courage. This is wrong, and I can't be part of it anymore. While our community support grew, the federal response was accelerating. Special Agent Maria Santos from the FBI interviewed me Monday afternoon, confirming receipt of our evidence package and scheduling witness interviews. She outlined potential federal charges that made my head spin. Mail fraud, wire fraud, SCRA violations. The FBI obtained a warrant to freeze Pinewood Property Solutions accounts and seize records. When Maggie's bank called to inform her that her accounts were frozen, the panic was immediate and visible. We watched from our command post as she frantically tried to contact the renters to modify lease agreements, attempted to withdraw HOA funds before they were frozen, and called her political connections for help, only to find them distancing themselves faster than politicians from a corruption scandal. Her lawyer delivered the harsh reality. Maggie, you're looking at federal fraud charges. My advice is to cooperate fully and hope for a plea deal. The final blow came when Robert Thornfield, facing the destruction of his own political career, moved out and filed for divorce. I can't be associated with this anymore, he told reporters. By Monday evening, Maggie was isolated, broke, and facing federal prison time. Our team gathered for final preparations for Tuesday's emergency HOA meeting, the showdown we'd been building toward. Tomorrow we end this, I told my brothers. Clean, legal, and with honor. We show them what real Americans look like when they stand together. The calm confidence in our camp was infectious. After 72 hours of chaos, we held the moral high ground, the legal advantage, and the community support. Justice was coming. Tuesday evening, the Pinewood Estates Community Center hadn't seen crowds like this since its grand opening. 89 residents packed into a room that normally held 12 for HOA meetings. My 8 veteran brothers sat in the front row, dress uniforms immaculate, while 3 news crews set up cameras. A county commissioner attended as an observer, and FBI agent Santos took notes from the back row. The atmosphere was electric with tension. Maggie entered looking like she'd aged 10 years in 3 days, clutching a folder of documents, visibly shaking, clearly aware that her world was collapsing. Brad Kaiser and the other board members sat separately, obviously distancing themselves from the sinking ship. Maggie tried to call the meeting to order with authority she no longer possessed. This emergency session is to address the harassment and illegal occupation. And Bob Williams stood up, cutting her off. Point of order. I move to suspend normal procedures and address the criminal fraud committed by the board president. Rosa Martinez, armed with HOA law expertise, guided the room. According to your own bylaws, any resident can call for a vote of no confidence with a simple majority. The parliamentary maneuver was beautiful to watch. Maggie tried to maintain control, but the room had turned completely against her. The vote wasn't even close. 67 residents voted to remove her as president immediately. Only 8 voted against, probably relatives and the few remaining sycophants. With Maggie removed from authority, I took the floor. Standing at the podium in full dress uniform, ribbons gleaming under the fluorescent lights, I presented our evidence with military precision. Using the projector, I walked through the timeline minute by minute. Day 1 of deployment. Property properly secured and notified. Month 3, first fraudulent violation notice. Month 6, shell company registration. Month 8, illegal rental begins. Month 18, I returned to find strangers in my home. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, looking directly at the news cameras, Margaret Thornfield stole $57,600, 0 cents from a deployed Navy SEAL. She used HOA authority to legitimize theft from a man serving his country. Agent Santos confirmed from the back row, the FBI has opened a criminal investigation into wire fraud, mail fraud, and violations of the Service Remembers Civil Relief Act. But I wasn't finished. This isn't just about my house. Board meeting minutes show they planned to target other military families. Your neighbors were next. The community impact was devastating for Maggie's remaining credibility. When residents realized this was part of a broader scheme targeting military families, the anger was palpable. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Maggie stood up, trembling, clearly coached by her lawyer but unable to help herself. I want to make a statement. The room fell silent as she began what can only be described as a public confession. The rental, it wasn't supposed to be permanent. The property was deteriorating, and I needed. The real motive spilled out. My husband lost his job in 2022. We were behind on our mortgage. The HOA position doesn't pay. I saw an opportunity to help preserve the neighborhood while solving our financial problems. Her attempt at justification only made it worse. Jake was gone. We didn't know if he was coming back. Military people move around. I thought he might not return. The audible gasps and angry murmurs filled the room. Several veterans stood up in solidarity. Someone shouted, he was serving his country. Under pressure and clearly breaking down, Maggie admitted to everything, creating the shell company specifically to steal rental income, forging violation notices to justify the theft, removing the military exemption clause to target veterans, planning to target other deployed service members. The meeting ended with the remaining board members voting unanimously. Immediate return of my property, termination of fraudulent rental agreement, full restitution of stolen funds, formal apology to me and my family, reform of HOA policies to protect military families. Jennifer Walsh personally handed me my house keys. Mr. Martinez, your home is waiting for you. But the real mic drop moment came as we left the building. Agent Santos approached Maggie in front of the news cameras. Margaret Thornfield, you're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, and violations of federal civil rights law. As she was led away in handcuffs while my veteran brother stood quietly in formation, I gave my final statement to the cameras. Justice was served tonight, not through violence or revenge, but through the legal system and community courage. This is what democracy looks like. Wednesday morning brought the kind of media attention that changes everything. My story wasn't just local news anymore. It had become a national symbol of military families fighting bureaucratic corruption. Tank coordinated media appearances while I maintained my core message. This was about justice, not revenge, about community, not conflict. By morning, 23 additional veterans had arrived from across the region, creating an impromptu honor guard for my homecoming. The federal investigation results were staggering. Agent Santos briefed us on what they'd uncovered. $73,000, 0 cents, in total stolen funds from multiple properties. Evidence of targeting 5 military families over 3 years, conspiracy charges against 2 other board members, Maggie facing 15-20 years in federal prison. The Department of Justice confirmed this as a hate crime against military service members, setting legal precedent for federal prosecution of HOA discrimination. The case would be cited in law schools as a landmark in civil rights protection. But the real transformation was happening in our neighborhood. The emergency HOA election results spoke volumes. President: Bob Williams, Army veteran. Vice President: Mrs. Chen, community elder. Secretary: Jennifer Walsh, whistleblower, retained. Treasurer: Dr. Sarah Martinez, Navy veteran's wife. Their first official acts revolutionized the community. Military families exempt from all HOA actions during deployment. Transparent financial reporting required monthly. Board meeting video recordings mandatory. Resident ombudsman position created. Zero tolerance for discrimination policy enacted. The personal reclamation of my house was emotional beyond words. With help from neighbors and veterans, I began restoring my home. The Patterson family moved out gracefully, leaving the house in excellent condition, and thanking me for understanding they were victims too. The restoration became symbolic. My father's Bronze Star display case returned to its place of honor. Emma's bedroom converted back to princess theme. The workshop reorganized with my father's tools exactly where he'd left them. I found a letter my father had hidden in his workshop before he died. Son, this house isn't just wood and walls. It's a foundation for family, a shelter for love, and a beacon for community. Protect it, and it will protect those you care about. The community rally that afternoon at the neighborhood entrance drew 127 residents with signs. We support our veterans. Honesty in leadership. Thank you for your service, Jake. Community justice served. 5 Maggie supporters showed up with HOA rights signs, but were vastly outnumbered and left quickly. The legal resolution came faster than anyone expected. At the county courthouse, Maggie Thornfield, now represented by a public defender after her expensive lawyer dropped her, pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges. Wire fraud, 3 counts. Mail fraud, 2 counts. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Violation of Service Member Civil Relief Act. Civil rights violations. Her sentence: 8 years federal prison, $200,000 0 cents restitution to victims, 3 years supervised probation, banned from HOA leadership for life, and community service, specifically helping military families. My victim impact statement focused on forgiveness and justice. Your Honor, Margaret Thornfield didn't just steal money. She stole my daughter's sense of home, my father's legacy, and my faith in community. But through this process, I learned that most Americans still believe in justice, honor, and supporting those who serve. I forgive Mrs. Thornfield, and I hope she uses her time to understand the difference between authority and service. The final press conference took place on my front porch, surrounded by 30-plus veterans and 50-plus neighbors. I addressed the media one last time. 3 days ago, I was a homeless veteran sleeping in my truck. Tonight, I'm home, not because I fought back with anger, but because I fought back with truth, supported by brothers who had my back and a community that chose justice over comfort. My call to action resonated nationwide. If you're a veteran facing HOA discrimination, know that you're not alone. If you're a community member watching corruption, know that your voice matters. And if you're someone in power, know that we're watching, we're recording, and we will hold you accountable. The defining image captured by news cameras showed me raising the American flag. As 30 veterans saluted and 50 neighbors applauded, that photo became the symbol of the story. Now, if you'll excuse me, I concluded with a smile, I have to go pick up my daughter. She's been away from home long enough. Friday afternoon, I stood in my driveway, watching my sister's car pull up. Emma burst out and ran into my arms like a guided missile, then immediately inspected every inch of her restored bedroom to make sure everything was perfect. "Daddy, was it scary fighting the bad people?" she asked that evening as we sat on her princess bed. "No, sweetheart, it wasn't scary because I had help from my brothers and friends, and because I knew I was fighting for something important, our home and our family. Are the bad people gone forever? The bad people are gone, and now we have good people watching over our neighborhood. Saturday's community celebration exceeded everyone's expectations. The Veterans BBQ drew 150-plus attendees, including 40 veterans from multiple branches. Local restaurants donated food, veteran musicians provided live music, and kids enjoyed military vehicle displays. The new HOA board announced the creation of the Staff Sergeant Martinez Memorial Garden in honor of my father, featuring a bench with a plaque in honor of all who serve, protecting freedom abroad and justice at home. Congressman Michael Torres, an Army veteran, attended and announced federal legislation inspired by my case, the Military Family Housing Protection Act, providing additional protections for deployed service members. Former Maggie supporters publicly apologized and volunteered for community service projects. The neighborhood was more unified than it had been in years, proof that communities can heal when good people stand together. The national impact grew beyond our wildest expectations. 12 states passed military HOA protection laws. Federal SCRA enforcement increased. The Military Legal Assistance Program expanded. New federal HOA oversight requirements were implemented. My case became a landmark legal precedent cited in military discrimination cases nationwide. Law schools used it as a case study in civil rights protection. Most importantly, 200-plus veterans contacted our team for help with similar disputes. Military Times established a HOA watch column. Veteran service organizations created an HOA legal support fund. Multiple HOA presidents resigned after community pressure. 3 months later, I established the Veterans Property Rights Foundation with my military brothers, providing free legal assistance to veterans facing HOA discrimination. I accepted a position as Veterans Affairs Community Liaison, helping military families navigate civilian bureaucracy. Emma thrived in her restored home, her bedroom wall now decorated with photos of Daddy's Army friends who helped save our house. I completed restoration of my father's workshop, turning it into headquarters for the foundation. The Bronze Star display case now included my own military medals alongside his. 6 months later, I appeared on the morning show to discuss the lasting impact. The real victory wasn't getting my house back. It was proving that ordinary people can stand up to corruption and win. It was showing my daughter that justice still exists when good people work together. The statistics were staggering. $2,300,000, 0 cents in stolen funds, recovered from military families nationwide. 47 HOA officials charged with federal crimes. 15,000 veterans registered for legal protection services. The Military Family Housing Protection Act passed with bipartisan support. 1 year later, I sit on my porch swing with Emma, watching veterans' motorcycles arrive for our monthly Coffee with Jake gathering, a tradition that started spontaneously and now draws veterans from 3 states. "Daddy, are you happy we're home?" Emma asks. "Princess, I'm not just happy we're home. I'm proud of the home we've built, not just our house, but our community." As American flags flutter throughout the neighborhood and children play safely in yards where veterans once camped, I realize the true victory. A community transformed from fear to courage, from isolation to brotherhood, from corruption to justice. If you're a veteran facing HOA discrimination, visit veteranspropertyrights.org for free legal assistance. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear that justice still wins when good people stand together. What's your HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments below. Your experience might help another veteran in need. And if you believe in supporting those who serve, hit that subscribe button, because there are more stories of ordinary heroes standing up to corrupt power coming your way. Sometimes the best revenge is just good old-fashioned justice served with military precision.